Hello and welcome to our discussion today. We want to take a quick look at learning styles and adult learning principles. Okay, so basically, that is what we want to quickly have a look at today. And then by the end of this class, you should be able to identify and differentiate between visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning styles. You should be able to explain the principles of adult learning, which is also called andragogy. We should be able to apply the strategies for designing training that accommodates diverse learning preferences. And then you should be able to use these techniques, or you should be able to use techniques that enhance learning retention in adult education settings. So as an HR person who is involved in training and development, you realize that the people you are going to be working with are not children. These are old people. Sometimes they are even older than you, the HR personnel. Okay. They know what they are about. They have more experience than you have. So if you are offering them training, then it is important to know which learning style will fit um, any category of people that you are working with. So if we say learning styles, the learning styles are individual preferences in how people receive and process information. So if you're organizing a training session, it's important to know that if you have 100 people seated under you and listening to you, not all the 100 people would learn in a particular way. All right. People have different ways of learning. People have different preferences of how they are able to assimilate the material that you have. Okay. And it is important that you recognize these learning styles because as you know the learning styles, it helps you as the trainer to deliver content more effectively. Okay. So, if you pick different kinds of people, if you pick people, there are people who are visual learners, some are auditory learners, and some are kinesthetic learners. So you realize that everybody is learning, but they require a specific way so that the learning will be effective. Otherwise, if you use one style for everybody, it may not really work. Okay, so if you have visual learners, you have to be able to tailor the training in such a way that the visual learners get to assimilate the material. Auditory learners also understand what you are saying. And then the kinesthetic learners also have their portion of the training. So visual learners are learners who prefer to see and observe. Okay, so for such learners, you would have to provide diagrams. If there are any, you have to provide charts. You have to provide videos, pictures. All right. And that is how they are able to learn. As they see those images, as they see the videos, and as they watch the diagrams, they are able to relate with the material that you have, or they're able to relate with the content that you are sharing. So visual learners learn best through infographics. They learn with slides, right? And then they also can learn with color-coded notes. So sometimes you see notes and you have red fonts, blue fonts, black fonts. All of those are to help them, the visual learners, to learn. Okay. So visual learners are learners who prefer to see and observe. All right. And they learn through infographics with slides, okay, that have pictures, videos, and then they also can learn through color-coded notes. Then you have auditory learners. Auditory learners are learners who learn best through listening and speaking. So that has to do with their voice. When they are hearing the voice and when they're also speaking, they get to learn best. Okay, so these kind of learners, the auditory learners, they respond well to lectures, they respond well to discussions, they respond well to audio recordings, and then they also respond well to verbal repetitions. Okay, the secret here is for the auditory learners, the more they listen, then they get to understand, or they get to absorb the material. Okay, so the auditory learners, they respond to lectures and discussions, audio recordings, and then verbal repetitions. Then you have the kinesthetic learners who prefer hands-on experience, and they also want to do something. They want to be involved in a physical activity, and that is how they get to learn. So for such people, if you are giving training, you can help with role play, you can assign them roles. Okay, you can take them through simulations, and then you can also take them out on a field work. We have explained all of this in our previous classes. If for any reason you don't remember, you may want to go back and listen to the alternative training options. Okay, so kinesthetic learners are hands-on people. They want to do something. They want to play their role. They want to try it out. They want to experiment. And as they experiment, they get to learn better. Okay. So it's important to know that individuals will not just align to a particular learning style, whether kinesthetic, whether auditory or visual. You can't have someone say, as for me, I am just visual, or as for me, I'm just auditory, or as for me, I'm just a kinesthetic learner. So you have people who are a combination of all three. Okay, so there is a spectrum where you can have someone aligned sometimes to auditory learning styles. At other times, they may want to try the kinesthetic learning styles. And then at other times, they may want to try the visual learning styles, depending on what the material they want to learn, or on what the main subject is that they have to learn. So if the topic, or if the content is very practical, then you realize that for someone who is maybe ideally an auditory learner, would want to now shift to a kinesthetic learner so that they can get the experience that they want. So you realize that a lot of people are multimodal. Multimodal here means that they can learn effectively through any of the styles, whether it be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Okay, so if you find yourself aligning to all of the three, it is not a wrong thing, or it is not a bad thing. A lot of people are multimodal. And so it is important that as you offer training, you have a blend of approaches. You are able to put all of these together. So you have a portion for the visual learners. So if you have slides, then the visual learners can be watching what is being said, or you can provide pictures or videos. And then as you explain your lecture, or as you give out whatever content you have to give out, the auditory learners will also be picking up. Okay. And then possibly after your training session, you can offer the kinesthetic learners an opportunity to try out what they have learned. So as a trainer or as an HR person, if you are putting together a training session for a group of people, it is important that you blend these approaches so that all the learners that are going through the training will be able will be able to get whatever content you have put together for them. Okay. So there are some principles of adult learning, right? And this was coined by Malcolm Knowles. Okay. And adult learning, or andragogy, is the art and science of helping adults to learn. I learned that it's easier for children to learn if you pick anything, it is easier for children to learn than to have adults learn. Maybe because they have a lot of things on their minds, or they have to attend to a lot of things, or maybe they've already exhausted a lot of space on their memory. All right. But andragogy is the art and science of helping adults to learn. It's important to know that adults are not children. Okay. Ideally, you can pick a child and direct them on what to do. Okay. Guide them to go through their whatever. If they are given tasks, you can guide them through their tasks, and they do not have a lot of experience. But if you look at adults, or if you look at old people, adults are self-directed. They know what they're about. Okay, most of them are goal-oriented, and they bring prior experience to learning. What this means is that before an adult comes for training, or before an adult sits in a training session, they have a fair idea of what exactly the subject matter is. Okay, so it's not like you are talking to an ignorant person altogether. By the time you are speaking to the adult, or you are giving them training, they have some experience. Okay, so it makes providing some kind of training sometimes a bit it's important to know that adults are self-directed, they are goal-oriented, and they bring prior experience to the session. All right. So the 6 assumptions of adult learning, according to Knowles, the first one says that adults have the need to know. Okay. They also have the self-concept. There's the experience. They are they are ready to learn. So there's the readiness to learn. They are oriented to learn, or their orientation to learning. And then the last one is motivation. Okay. So let's go through them. The first one says the need to know. Adults have a need to know. All right. They need to understand the reason for learning. So it's not like you just provide content and provide materials for them, and that is it. They need to know why you are providing such a content, why the content is being provided the way it is um being provided. So you need to give a reason for a particular training session. Okay, so you don't just back or put people together and say you are training them. They need to know why you are offering that kind of training. And then there's also the self-concept, which is the second one. It's important to know that adults are autonomous and they are self-directed. They can learn on their own. So you can tailor a training session for an adult in a way that you will not need any facilitator. You just make available the resources and they can learn. Okay, so there's the self-concept where adults are autonomous and they are self-directed. Then the third one is experience. It is important to know that adults have gone through a lot of experiences, rich life experiences that they bring on board. So every time they are seated there going through a particular training session, you don't assume that they are just empty boxes sitting down there. They have a lot of experience. And as a trainer, it is important to sometimes tap from the experience of your trainees. Okay, and that will help you to explain your material better. Okay, and then the fourth assumption says adults have a readiness to learn, because most adults are already working and they are either looking for promotion, or they are looking for a pay raise. So if someone is looking for a kind of position in his firm, then he's going to link any developmental task or developmental role to the fact that if he learns, then he's likely to attain that position that he's looking for. So you realize that in most of the cases, adults are ready to learn. All right. Then there's the orientation to learning, where adults are problem centered rather than content centered. So for every material that you are giving out, the focus is not on the content, but the focus is on what problem can be resolved based on the content that is being given out, right? So you need to know that adults are oriented to learning, but they want problem-centered learning rather than content-centered learning. And then the motivation, which is the last assumption, states that adults are driven by internal rather than external factors. Okay, so if an adult wants to undergo training, then it's mainly sometimes due to intrinsic reasons. Okay, maybe due to what they want to achieve or how they feel about their particular training. That is what will motivate them to go for the training, not necessarily what is happening around them. Okay, so these are the 6 assumptions that guide adult learning: the need to know, the self-concept, the experience, readiness to learn, orientation to learning, and then motivation. All right. What does this mean for designing training? What all of this mean is that if you are putting together a training session, it's important that your content will be relevant and practical for your trainees. Okay, so you don't just focus on the content of what you are giving out, but you also focus on how the content can be applied. Okay, how the content can help your trainees solve problems. And that is where you get your trainees to see the relevance of a particular training. So it's important that you provide relevant practical content. You also have to connect the learning to real life experiences so that it does not look abstract. Right. Once it looks abstract, then the adult learner will not be able to identify with what is being discussed. You also have to allow for learner autonomy and reflection. So after going through the content or after going through your material, it is important to allow for these adult learners to reflect on what they have learned and how it applies to them individually. Of course, the material will not mean the same things to everybody. Okay, so it's important to know how the content applies to each person that has gone through the training. And so that is why the reflection is very, very important. And then, as you deliver the training, it's important to use participatory methods and active learning. Okay, so you build on the experience that your trainees have, okay, and you involve them in the learning. Get them to share experiences, get them to contribute where necessary, all right? And then it will help with active learning. So, as they are talking about their experiences and as you are sharing your content, they get to shape their understanding about whatever is being said. Another thing to note is that when you are putting together a training session, it's important to as you have noticed the different kinds of learning styles, it's important to blend them in your design. So you have to blend the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic elements, everything together in your training so that you don't know who is an auditory learner, who is a visual learner, or who is a kinesthetic learner. But at the end of the training session, each of these individuals would have to benefit from the session. Okay, so you need to blend the visual, the auditory, and then the kinesthetic elements. You also have to provide materials in multiple formats. So, for example, you have your lecture notes, you have your slides, and then sometimes you also have a recorded lecture. All of those are materials that you can make available to your trainees. Okay, so once you provide the materials in multiple formats, you are addressing the needs of the visual learner, you are addressing the needs of the auditory learner, and you're also addressing the needs of the kinesthetic learner. All of those at the same time in your training. Okay, and it's also important to consider the learners' backgrounds, their needs, and the context in which you are offering the training so that the training would be relevant, right? So for some practical strategies, when you are offering a training session, it's important to most of the times use icebreakers and interactive tools to get people involved. Okay, to get people to feel easy around themselves, to be able to interact among themselves. So you can come up with a discussion, you can come up with quizzes, you can come up with question and answers. Okay, you can come up with case discussions, right? Or activities that will get the training participants to interact among themselves. Okay, and then you can rotate the instructional methods, right? So depending on which instructional method, whether simulation or role playing, you can rotate the method so that you get to address the needs of all your participants. And then you can also use learning management systems to offer the content in various modes. We have spoken about the modes. You can give notes, you can give recorded lectures, you can give slides. Okay, all of those are various modes that you can deliver your content in, and it can be made available on your LMS if you have any at the workplace. So after a particular training session, you can share the slides with participants, share your video with participants if the training was recorded. All right. If there were activities that were done, you can share those activities with all participants, okay, to help them assimilate the material. It is also important to note that adults forget about 50% of what they learn within an hour. So if you teach someone or if you offer training and then within 1 hour, you do not reinforce what has been learned, or you do not get people to practice what they have learned, they get to forget within an hour everything that they have heard. Okay, so it's important that you as a trainer understands retention and how to help people retain the information that you have given them. This can be done through repetition. You can do this by engaging the people, possibly in a discussion. Okay. And then you can also do this by helping the people to see how relevant that particular discussion was. So repetition, engagement, and then relevance can help you to to reduce the forgetting rate for of the learners, okay, and help them to retain whatever it is that they they have learned. So there are some strategies for enhanced learning. You have spaced learning, right? So as we keep in mind that we have adults learning, forgetting about 50% of the things they learn within an hour, it is important to put together strategies that will enhance their retention. Okay. So some of the strategies that can be used, the first one is spaced learning. You have active recall, then reflection. You also have peer teaching, and then assessment with feedback, right? So for the spaced learning, what you do is that you don't put all the training together. So you don't allow them to sit for like an 8 hour session just listening to content, right? After the 8 hours, they may have lost everything. So rather than getting them to sit at one time for a long period, it's better to distribute the learning over time. Okay, so get them to do maybe 2 hours and then do another 2 hours at another time. And then it helps to retain what they have learned. So that is the spaced learning, distributes the learning over time. Okay. And then you can also practice what you call the active recall, where you encourage the learners to retrieve the information. So after maybe an hour of talking, you can ask questions so that you see how easy or difficult it is for your participants to recall whatever you shared. Okay. Then there's also reflection. Reflection is where you get people to think about what they have heard and how it relates to them, or what they think about what they have heard. All right. Or how practical they think what they have heard is. All right. But the reflection helps to get the people involved, get them to relate with the material. Okay. Then you also have peer teaching. Peer teaching is where you let the learners explain to one another what they have learned. Okay, so this helps with, so you can get two trainees or a number of them go over what you have discussed, and that will help to explain the content to the other people. That's what you call the peer teaching. Then you have assessment with feedback. Okay, where you can give maybe a short quiz after the training, check the understanding of the people, all right? And then based on the performance, you give a feedback. Okay, so if a particular response is not right, you give feedback on what the correct thing should be. So these are some strategies for enhancing retention, but it's important to keep in mind that every adult, as they learn in an hour, whatever they have learned, if they don't make use of it, they tend to forget about 50% of everything that they learn in an hour. So today we have said that there are different learning styles for adults, and it's important that we understand the learning styles, because as we understand the learning styles, we'll be able to tailor our instructions, our training sessions, and our delivery of content in a way that will help our trainees to pick up all the lessons we want them to pick up. Okay, it's also important to know that adult learners thrive on relevance, on autonomy, and on experience. Okay, so it's important that you, as you prepare your training material, you accommodate all styles. Okay, we have the auditory, the visual, and then the kinesthetic. Okay, you try to accommodate all learning styles and use retention enhancing techniques, okay, to ensure that they do not forget what they've been taught and that they actively use what they have been taught. So as we combine these elements, it leads to more effective, more inclusive, and lasting learning outcomes. So these are some references for you. What I want you to do today is to identify which of these learning styles align with you. Okay, so you as an individual, which of the learning styles apply to you, or which of them aligns with you, and then you share your experience of what the learning style is. Yes, you would have stated that, and share an experience of when this learning style helped you to grasp a complex concept. Okay, so I will listen to all of this in class. We will discuss them and then discuss the entire material as we meet. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.